What if the secret you've guarded your entire life suddenly becomes the key to your greatest success? What if the man who holds your heart is the one who forces you to choose between love and legacy? What if one moment of truth could shatter prejudices and rewrite your destiny forever? Kenneth Harlan stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his downtown Los Angeles office, watching the late afternoon sun paint the Hollywood hills in gold. 34 years old, three-time Emmy winner, and the youngest executive producer to greenlight a major studio series in the last decade, he should have felt on top of the world. Instead, his chest tightened every time he glanced at the script pages scattered across his desk. Shadows of Silence, his passion project, was bleeding out in test screenings. Audience scores hovered at 42%. The studio was already whispering about pulling the plug. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the same gesture he had used since college to hide the tremor in his fingers. Back then, in a small Indiana town, that tremor had come from fear of his father's Sunday sermons. A real man doesn't cry over boys, Pastor Harlan had barked the day Kenneth came home with a black eye after defending a classmate. The words had never left him. They lived in the marrow of every decision he made in Hollywood, where image was currency and rumors traveled faster than contracts. A soft knock pulled him back. Patrick Ellis leaned in the doorway, two coffees in hand, the sleeves of his charcoal button-down rolled to the elbows. Patrick had been his production coordinator on 3 projects and his secret everything for 5 years. Tall, easy smile, warm brown eyes that saw through every mask Kenneth wore. No one in the building suspected. They made sure of it. "You look like you're planning a funeral," Patrick said, setting the cups down. His voice carried that gentle Midwestern lilt they both shared, a small tether to the homes they had fled. "The numbers aren't that bad yet." Kenneth forced a laugh. "Tell that to the investors who just flew in from New York." He took the coffee, their fingers brushing longer than necessary. The small touch sent the usual spark up his arm. "I keep thinking if I could just rewrite the 3rd act." Patrick's expression softened. "Or maybe stop rewriting yourself every time the lights come on." He didn't push. He never did in the office. But the words hung between them like the city smog outside. Kenneth changed the subject to tomorrow's reshoots. Yet the question Patrick hadn't voiced echoed louder than the traffic below. How long could they keep pretending? That night, in Patrick's quiet Silver Lake apartment, the pretense fell away. They cooked pasta, laughed about a ridiculous grip who kept calling Patrick sir, and later lay on the couch with the TV muted. Kenneth traced the line of Patrick's jaw with his thumb. "I'm scared the film is dying because I'm dying inside it," he whispered. Patrick didn't answer with words. He simply pulled him closer, the kind of silent promise that had kept them going through every late-night rewrite and every careful distance in public. By morning, the fear had returned. Kenneth's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Your father saw an article about you and that new actor. He's asking questions again. Come home for Christmas." He deleted it without replying. The weight of 2 lives. One the golden producer everyone admired, the other the man who loved another man, pressed harder than the deadline looming over Shadows of Silence. He arrived at the studio lot early, the air already thick with the smell of craft service coffee and exhaust. Crew members nodded respectfully. Interns stared a second too long. Everyone wanted a piece of the rising star. Kenneth smiled the practice smile, signed a few posters, and disappeared into editing Bay 3. Patrick was already there, sleeves rolled again, eyes on the monitor. They worked side by side for hours, trimming scenes, arguing over lighting cues, the easy rhythm of collaboration masking everything else. Until the studio head, Marlene Voss, walked in without knocking. "Numbers dropped another 3 points overnight," she said, folding her arms. "The focus groups keep saying the lead character feels repressed. They want him to kiss the girl by the end. Fix it, Kenneth, or we pull the plug next week." The door closed behind her. Patrick's hand found Kenneth's under the table. Neither spoke. The silence said enough. The film was dying because its creator was still hiding. The following week blurred into a fever of reshoots and damage control. Kenneth flew to New York for emergency meetings, leaving Patrick to hold the fort in Los Angeles. In a glass conference room overlooking Times Square, 3 gray-haired investors grilled him about market viability. One leaned forward and asked, Is there any reason the hero can't just fall in love with the female lead? Audiences love a good romance. Kenneth's throat tightened. He gave the safe answer about artistic integrity, but inside he heard his father's voice again. Real men don't. Back in LA, Patrick met him at LAX with takeout Thai and a quiet drive home. They ate on the balcony, city lights stretching below like scattered stars. Patrick finally broke the careful distance they maintained in daylight. You're killing yourself trying to make everyone else happy. The film, your family, the studio. When do you get to be happy? Kenneth stared at the skyline. If I tell the truth, the film dies faster. Investors bolt. My dad, he'll never speak to me again. Patrick's fingers laced through his. And if you don't tell it, you die slower. I've watched you fade for 5 years, Ken. I love you too much to keep watching. The words lodged in Kenneth's chest like a splinter. That night, they didn't sleep. Instead, they talked, really talked, about the night they first met on the set of a low-budget indie 5 years earlier. Patrick had been the quiet coordinator who remembered everyone's coffee order. Kenneth had been the hotshot producer who couldn't stop staring. One late-night location scout, one shared umbrella in the rain, and the spark had ignited. They had been careful ever since. Separate cars to events, no photos together, coded text messages. Love lived in stolen weekends and whispered promises. But now the film was circling the drain, and the secrecy felt like the anchor dragging it under. Patrick suggested something radical. What if the story we're telling on screen is the story you're living off screen? Maybe the audience needs to see the truth to feel it. Kenneth laughed bitterly. You want me to come out so the movie can get better reviews? Patrick shook his head. I want you to come out so you can finally breathe. 2 days later, a tabloid photo surfaced, grainy, taken through a restaurant window, showing Kenneth and Patrick leaning close over dinner. The headline read, "Is Hollywood's golden boy hiding more than his next script?" The studio called an emergency meeting. Marlene's face was stone. Kill the rumor or kill the project. Your choice. That evening, Kenneth stood in his empty office, the city glittering indifferently outside. Patrick waited in the car downstairs. For the first time, the two paths forked clearly. Keep lying and lose the film, or tell the truth and lose everything else. The choice felt impossible until he remembered Patrick's words on the balcony. He picked up the phone and dialed the network's biggest morning show. I'd like to book a live segment, he said. I have something to say. The green room smelled of stale coffee and nerves. Kenneth's hands shook so badly he spilled water on his tie. Patrick sat beside him, calm as ever, one knee touching his under the table. You don't have to do this today, Patrick murmured. We can walk out right now. Kenneth looked at the man who had loved him through every closet door and every denial. I do. For both of us. And for the film. The producer counted down. Lights hit Kenneth like stage fright multiplied by 1,000. The host, a polished woman with perfect teeth, smiled at the camera. Today we have Kenneth Harlan, the visionary behind Shadows of Silence. Kenneth, you asked for this time to make a personal announcement. The floor is yours. He stared straight into the lens, heart hammering against his ribs. 5 years ago, I fell in love with someone who makes me want to be better than the version of myself I've been selling to the world. That someone is Patrick Ellis, the man sitting beside me right now. The studio audience gasped. Cameras swung. Patrick's hand found his on live television. I'm gay. I've been gay my whole life, and I've hidden it because I was terrified of losing everything I built. But hiding almost killed the film I poured my soul into. So today I'm done hiding. If that costs me investors, so be it. If it costs me my family, I'll learn to live with that too. But I won't let it cost me myself anymore. The host recovered smoothly. That's incredibly brave, Kenneth. What do you hope this changes? He answered without hesitation. I hope it changes the way people watch Shadows of Silence. Because the story on screen is the story I was too afraid to live. Maybe now audiences will feel it the way I always meant them to. Patrick squeezed his hand harder. The segment ended in a storm of applause and flashing phones. By the time they left the building, Twitter was exploding. Kenneth Harlan is gay trended worldwide within 20 minutes. Studio phones rang off the hook. Marlene texted, "This is either career suicide or genius. We'll know by tomorrow's numbers." That night, they drove to Patrick's apartment in silence, the city lights blurring through the windshield. Inside, Kenneth finally let the tears come, years of swallowed fear pouring out. Patrick held him without saying a word, the kind of quiet strength that had always been their anchor. "Whatever happens," Patrick whispered, "I'm right here." Morning brought chaos. Kenneth's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His mother left 3 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. His father sent one text, "Call me when you remember who you are." Studio interns stared in the hallways. A few offered quiet fist bumps, others avoided eye contact. The tabloids had a field day. Gay producers' bombshell live confession. Is Shadows of Silence doomed? But something else was happening too. Ticket pre-sales for the film's limited release jumped 30% overnight. Social media filled with messages from young queer viewers. Finally, a story that feels real. Focus group scores climbed from 42 to 68 in 48 hours. Marlene called it dawn, voice tight with disbelief. The investors who wanted to pull funding yesterday are now doubling down. They say the authenticity angle is fresh. "We're pushing the wide release up 2 weeks. Kenneth stood on his balcony, coffee forgotten in his hand. Patrick stepped behind him, arms circling his waist. "You did it," he said softly. "You told the truth and the sky didn't fall." Kenneth turned, resting his forehead against Patrick's. "Not yet. My dad still hasn't called. And half the crew thinks I lied to them for years." Patrick kissed him gently. "One truth at a time, Ken. The rest will come." The next week was a whirlwind of interviews Kenneth had never planned to give. He sat on couches across America, Patrick beside him when the network allowed, talking about identity, fear, and the courage it took to rewrite his own ending. Each conversation chipped away at the armor he had worn so long. At night they returned to the editing bay, tweaking the final cut with new eyes. The lead character's repression now read as lived experience instead of flaw. The love story, subtle, aching, never explicit, suddenly felt universal. But not everyone cheered. An executive producer from a rival studio leaked old emails suggesting Kenneth had used straight actors to hide his orientation. The betrayal stung deeper than expected. Patrick found him in the parking garage after a particularly brutal day, eyes red. "He was supposed to be a friend," Kenneth said. Patrick pulled him into a hug right there between the cars. "Real friends stay. The rest were never yours to keep." The premiere arrived like a storm. Red carpet stretched outside the TCL Chinese Theater, cameras flashing in a blinding wall. Kenneth stepped out first, Patrick's hand on his lower back. Public now, no more hiding. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some reporters shouted questions about his father. Others asked about the film's sudden surge. Kenneth answered every one with the calm he had practiced in front of bathroom mirrors for weeks. Inside the theater, the lights dimmed. The opening credits rolled. Kenneth's heart pounded harder than on live television. He reached for Patrick's hand in the dark. As the story unfolded, 2 men circling each other through years of denial, fear, and finally courage, the audience leaned forward. No one coughed. No one checked phones. When the final scene faded to black, silence held for 3 full seconds. Then applause erupted, standing ovation rolling like thunder. Outside, critics already tweeted glowing reviews. Authentic. Brave. The performance of the year. Box office projections doubled, then tripled. By morning, the film had shattered the previous record for widest opening weekend audience score among adult dramas. Investors called it a miracle. Kenneth called it truth. But home brought the other shoe. His mother flew in unannounced, eyes swollen. "Your father won't come," she said in the kitchen of Patrick's apartment. "He says he needs time." She looked at Patrick, really looked, then hugged him too. "Thank you for loving my son when I couldn't see how much he needed it." The moment cracked something open in Kenneth he hadn't known was still frozen. That weekend they drove up the coast to a small beach town, just the 2 of them. No cameras, no deadlines. They walked barefoot on the sand, waves pulling at their ankles. Patrick stopped, turned, and dropped to one knee right there under the setting sun. "I've loved you through every closet door and every spotlight. Marry me, Ken. Let's write the next chapter together." Kenneth's answer was a kiss that tasted like salt and promise. 6 months later, Shadows of Silence crossed 200 million domestic and kept climbing. Critics called it the film that changed the conversation. Kenneth stood on another stage, this time the Oscars, accepting Best Picture with Patrick beside him. The speech was short. I used to think success meant hiding who I was. Tonight I know it means living it out loud. Thank you to the man who never let me forget that. Backstage, his father waited in the wings. They hadn't spoken since the announcement. The older man's hands trembled as he pulled Kenneth into an awkward hug. I was wrong, he said simply. I'm proud of you, son. The words landed like rain on parched earth. Patrick watched from a few feet away, eyes shining. Later that night, in their new house overlooking the hills, Kenneth and Patrick sat on the porch swing. The city lights twinkled below. We almost lost everything, Kenneth said. Patrick rested his head on his shoulder. We almost lost ourselves. Instead, we found each other all over again. The film continued breaking records internationally. Young directors reached out, inspired. Kenneth mentored 3 of them personally, making sure they never felt they had to hide. Patrick produced the follow-up project, a quiet love story about 2 men building a life after coming out. Life wasn't perfect, prejudice still existed, family healing took time, and the spotlight could still burn. But they faced it together, hands linked in public and in private. In the end, the greatest record they broke wasn't box office. It was the one written on their own hearts, the courage to live honestly and the joy that followed. In this story, authenticity proves stronger than any spotlight or prejudice. Kenneth's journey shows that hiding dims your light, while embracing truth can illuminate paths for countless others. The lesson is simple yet profound. Real success blooms only when we stop performing and start living. My advice: live your truth even when the world isn't ready. The right people will stay and celebrate you. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love anyway.